Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Harry Lauseneziris, and this is my YouTube channel grecochess. I just came back from Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I participated in the Connecticut Open chess tournament. And in this and in next few videos, I'm going to tell you what happened. To be more specific, how did my games go? But first, let me share with you the announcement of the tournament. It took place at the University of Bridgeport in Bridgeport, Connecticut. 4 rounds, meaning every player had to play a total of 4 games. And what are the sections? There was an open section, meaning anyone could participate, and usually the highest rated players would participate, including a couple of grandmasters. There was the under 2100, the under 1700, that's where I participated, under 1200, under 700, and there was the NER, I believe not rated. And the time control, at least for my section, was G45 plus 10, as you may see. I'm going to show it to you now. I'm going to highlight it. Yes. What did this mean? What does this mean? It means that when the game starts, players have 45 minutes on their clock. But the 10 seconds that you see later is not a delay but an increment. This means that after every move, players add 10 seconds to their time, which of course can make the games extremely lengthy, because if after every move you get extra 10 seconds, this means that after 60 moves you get another 10 minutes, and it can go on indefinitely. And let me share with you now some photos of the tournament, some pictures. This is how the location looked from the outside when you enter the building, the registration. And I took it because I love these two nice statues on the left and the right side. And here the various sections where people can check to see if their names were there. And let's look from the inside. This is the playing hall, and as you may see, the organizers have already prepared the boards and they'll set the clocks, so the players don't have to worry about it. You go there, the boards and the clocks are ready. And I would really like to thank the organizers, because in most tournaments that is not the case. The only tournaments where I have seen organizers have ready boards and clocks is the Chessanity one and this one, the Connecticut Open. That's enough about the introduction. Time now to go to my first game. And first of all, let me share my opponent. Information about my opponent. Her name is Moksha Varma Hasti. Her rating, at least before the tournament, was 1329, and she is in the 77.1 percentile. Compare this with my numbers. My rating was 1582, that's the official one, but after the two latest tournaments I participated, meaning New York State and Chessanity, it will rise to 1609. And I'm in the 87th percentile, which would mean that I happen to be the favorite. But let's see what actually happened, because being favorite and winning are two completely different things. You're going to see the chessboard from chess.com, where I'm going to enter the moves one by one from the beginning until the end. On the right, you're going to see computer evaluation. Positive number means computer thinks white is better. Negative, that black is better. Computer will show whether a move played was the best, if not, which would have been the best moves, and which are the best 3 options for the other player whose turn is to come. And my opponent Moksha had the white pieces and I had the black. The Moksha starts with the d pawn, sending it to d4. I reply the same way. Pawn goes to d5. Pawn goes to c4. And I decided to play what's called the Slav defense instead of moving the e pawn to move the c pawn to c6. Why? Because this liberates this does not block the bishop at c8. Knight goes to c3 for whites, and my other knight goes to f6 for myself, for black. Moksha takes my pawn on d5, and I use my knight to take it. Why the knight and not the pawn? Well, don't think it really makes it. Inaccuracy, the computer would rather have me take it to the pawn. Okay, so white is ahead by 0.77. So here we skip the theory. Okay, something to know for next time. Pawn goes to e4 for white. And I decide to exchange knights. You don't have to worry where to place my knight and if it's going to be attacked again. Take it on c3, white takes it back. And now time to develop the other knights to d7. This is a nice square for the knight, but not so nice for the bishop on c8 that is blocked. And Moksha develops her bishop to c4. And I send my knight to f6 so that my bishop on c8 is not blocked any longer. Moksha attacks with the pawn. Now one needs to be careful with these attacks because most likely I'm going to see it and I'm going to move my knight, assuming the knight has a safe square, but then the pawn cannot go back. It has created a weakness on the d5 square. But for the time being, that is not so much of an issue. I'm going to send my knight back to the d5 square. Queen goes to c2. And I was thinking what to do. I move the e pawn to e6. The result is that my bishop on f8 is free, but my bishop on c8 is constrained. At least I have more protection for my knight. Bishop goes to d3. And my pawn on h7 is attacked. It's attacked twice and defended once. And if I don't defend it, Moksha has a chance to recover it. A computer says that this is an inaccuracy. Let me tell you what would happen if I ignored it. Moksha would take it, but then I would move the g pawn, and the bishop is trapped. Moksha could take it and lose the bishop, but then queen would take a g6. So it would be an exchange of a bishop for 3 pawns with the queen and g6 checking, and it's an open question if such an attack would be successful or not. I didn't want to take my chances, so I moved my pawn to h6. Inaccuracy as a computer would rather have me push my c pawn. Pawn goes to a3 for white to block the knight from coming to b4. Inaccuracy again. My bishop goes to e7 to continue the development. Knight goes to f3. Continue development and castling for me. Mistake, says the computer. 1.90 for white. But castling for white. Inaccuracy again. Still from 1.21. White gets an advantage of 1.40. Time for me to develop to move my b pawn to b6, so at least my bishop on c8 can go to b7. Mistakes the computer, and white has an enormous advantage of 2.99. White computer would rather have me develop my f pawn, go to f5. I'm scared to do it because this leaves the pawn e6 backwards. Pawn goes to c4 for white. A great move, says the computer. 2.83 advantage, and my knight goes back to c7. Bishop goes to e4. And bishop now attacks the pawn on c6. Not only that, behind it is a rook. I cannot just move my pawn to c5 because then I lose my rook. And I defend my pawn with a bishop on b7. I have to be careful because now my bishop is unprotected. Next move, I cannot move my pawn to c5 again because then I'm going to lose my bishop. Pawn goes to a4 for white. Inaccuracy. The computer don't understand. It's not the move is bad by itself, but it is that the move is wasted. I'm not sure what exactly it accomplished. And myself, I'm going to make sure that my bishop is protected. Rook goes to b8. Bishop goes to a3. Maybe that's what white wanted, to give space to the bishop to go to a3. Not a good move, says the computer. But for the time being, at least, I have to worry about it. Should I exchange or not? And behind that is the rook on e8, excuse me, on f8. I decide to exchange the bishops, so don't have to worry about anymore. Rook goes to h3, and my queen goes to e7. Rook goes to b3, attack along the b file, and now I can safely push my pawn to c5. Inaccuracy is the computer, but at least I'm not losing any material. We exchange bishops. Great moves is the computer to take my bishop, and I take it back. And we completed 20 moves. After 20 moves, after a lot of inaccuracies and back and forth, white has an advantage of 0.99. Move number 21 now continue, and Moksha sends her queen to e4. And threatens my rook. And the way I save my rook is by sending my knight to a6. Hopefully it will go to b4 later and have a strong presence in white's half of the board. Let's see. Moksha doubles her rooks, sends the other rook on b1 along the b file. Mistake, says the computer. And now from 1.26 for white, I have the advantage of 1.32. But why? Let's see. Will I be able to take advantage of this evaluation? Meaning, will I play the correct next move? First of all, I'm taking the pawn on d4. Knight takes back. And this is a mistake. Black has an advantage of 3.18. And the moment I saw it, I knew on the board, I knew it. In fact, before white would take back the pawn, I had seen that if the queen takes back the pawn, I have work to do. But if the knight takes back the pawn, I have a wonderful move. And if viewers would like to pause the video for a few seconds and try to find my move, you are welcome to do so. A nice way to practice your tactical skills. And whether you found it or not, that was the move that I played. Knight goes to c5, great move. And yes, it's a great move because it is a fork. I attack simultaneously queen and rook. Moksha sees the danger, but she decides to retaliate. Danger levels, as I say. Instead of just moving her queen and taking my knight for a rook and being an exchange down, she decides to attack my own queen with the knight going to d6, to c6. Inaccuracy is the computer, and more than that, I really believe that was a big mistake. You see, my advantage becomes 4.52. And why is it a mistake? Because I start a combination. And once again, viewers, if you want to pause your videos and see my combination and how I got more than just exchange I was hoping for, please feel free to do so. Well, I take the queen and I don't worry if my queen is lost because I take with a check, yes, white checks me, and I take it with my rook. And you see that after this combination, I'm ahead by a piece, by a knight. 4.97 advantage for me. But is it time to relax and think that the game will win itself? I don't think so. And from now on, I really was trying every move. Be careful, make sure I don't let the wind slip from my fingers because of a careless move. It has happened previous time and it should not happen now. Now what Moksha will do is take the d file for her rook. My knight goes to c5, attacks the other rook. And the other rook cannot, not only attack, cannot just go the d file and double the rooks because there it will also be taken. So the rook goes to a3, protecting the a4 pawn. And since I'm ahead, I want to exchange material. Rook goes to d7. So Moksha has a chance, the choice either to exchange rooks, and then I'm near the edge, or give me the d file. Once again, I'm mentioning why do you want to exchange when you are ahead? Because so long as there are pieces, you may either blunder them by mistake, or there might be a secret combination that you least expected that might cost you. If materials are not there, this cannot happen. Of course, you cannot grab your opponent's pieces the same way, but since you're ahead, you don't need to. I wish everything would go out and I would just have a knight and a few pawns. I need some pawns. I cannot just have the knight, but I need a few pawns. If the rooks could disappear, that would be wonderful. And still, I need to be careful because even if you have knight and a few pawns, if white promotes one of her pawns, she can win the game. One needs to think this all the time. So, Moksha decides to concede the d-file. And now my rook goes to d4, threatening the pawn on c4. Moksha seems to be scared about the back rank, so she pushes her g-pawn to g3. Well, there is a reason to be concerned because until now she had back rank issues, but when you're behind in material, even if you avoid a back rank, unless you're able to change the situation, you could also lose the game. I'm taking the c-pawn, so in addition to the extra knight, I have an extra pawn. Rook goes to a1 to defend the a pawn that was attacked twice. It's defended twice. My other rook joins the game, goes to d8. And by the way, having moved my pawn to h6 before to avoid losing it, I don't have a back rank issue. Don't have to worry that suddenly, out of nowhere, I'm touching material ahead and a rook lands on the 8th rank. Pawn goes to e5. And I'd better be careful here because the pawn might somehow out of nowhere lead to promotion. I'm not going to take it because if I take it, I have doubled pawns. Instead, I'm going to push my b6 pawn to b5. Rook goes to b1 to attack it, and my pawn goes to a6. We finished 32 moves until now, and I'm mentioning the number 32 because in the score sheet they gave us, every column has a space for 32 moves. After 32 moves, I'm ahead by a knight and a pawn, 569 advantage for me. But let's see how the game will continue. Rook goes to, king goes to g2, and now rook goes to g2 because I'm threatening the f2 pawn. Rook goes to b1 to a1 again, and my rook goes to c2. I'm threatening the pawn on f2. Rook goes to f3 and defends the pawn on f2. I cannot take it because it's attacked twice by my two rooks, defended twice by the rook and the king. But my knight will go to d3. And there's a double threat. It both threatens this pawn on f2 and also the pawn on e5. Moksha defends her pawn by sending the rook on f1, but for me that's what I wanted. That's what would happen either way or other. One of the pawns would be lost. I'm taking the pawn on e5. So now I'm ahead by a knight and 2 pawns. Is this enough to guarantee the victory? Under perfect play, yes, but will I play perfectly? Rook goes to e3 to attack my knight. And my knight goes to c4 to threaten the pawn on a5. Rook goes back to f3. And that's what I wanted. Now I can grab the pawn on a5. I'm not sure how exactly it could be saved. Maybe if the rook or if the other rook went to a1, because it could the rook from from e3 could not go to a3, it would be taken. But if the rook from f1 went to a1, I would grab the f2 pawn. And at this point, after 38 moves, my advantage is 599, and I have what is my advantage? It is one knight and 3 pawns, and two out of these 3 pawns are connected pass pawns. Rook goes to a3 to attack the knight. And I don't want to lose either the knight or the pawn. If I move the knight, I'm losing the pawn on a6. Not that I need it to win, but keep as much material difference as possible. And the way I do it is by sending my rook to a2. So if Moksha takes my knight, I take her rook, and she's even more behind. Moksha decides to send the other rook to a1, which I could exchange rooks, but I want in the meantime to do something even better. Take the pawn on f2. King goes to h3, and now take the other pawn on h2. King goes to g4. And look at the situation. Computer says I have mate in 5. I didn't see it at the time. But what I saw is that I had an extra knight and extra 5 pawns. I didn't see the mate, but I saw that I had an opportunity. Rook goes to f2, and I let Moksha take my knight because now I have mate in one move if Moksha just takes my knight or does not defend against the mate. The mate it would be if the pawn from f7 went to f5. But Moksha saw it and sent her rook on f3. Computer says I have mate in 4 moves. Let's see. Will I play correctly or not? My pawn from f7 goes to 5, yes. And now I have mate in 3 moves according to the computer. King goes to 4. Will I continue correctly? Computer wants me to place my knight on c4, and that would give me mate in 3 moves. But I didn't see it. I wanted to continue be as attacking as possible because that would be a gamble. If I send to c4, then my rook would be lost or who knows what. In c4, what would the knight on c4 would do is it would block the two escape squares of the king on e3 and d5. And if I lost the rook and took it back, then the king could go. I'm not sure where exactly. No, then she wouldn't need to take my rook. She would need to push the pawn, and mate was very near. I didn't see that time. I saw I was winning so long as I avoided any major blunders. Continue the attack by checking from g5. Misses the computer. Yep, I still have an enormous advantage, 692, but not the mate in 3 moves. And let's see what happened. King goes d5. Fortunately, perhaps I didn't know that I had missed a mate. Otherwise, I might have been depressed and not so careful as I should. Knight goes to c4. Check. King goes to f6. And now look at what is happening. King comes near my king. If Moksha can place a rook on the 8th file, she might even checkmate. But will this happen? Let's give a look. I'm taking the rook because now the advantage is that I got an extra rook. And Moksha takes my pawn on a6. My rook goes to a3. Hopefully exchanging the rooks. Moksha's last hope is a rook. She takes the pawn on e6. And if I'm not careful, of course, in the perfect play that cannot happen if I'm not careful, king goes to g6, rook to e8, and I lost the game. Made out of nowhere. I saw the danger coming, and how do I defend? I send my rook to a8, so that no matter how the kings are allied, Moksha's rook cannot go to the 8th rank and checkmate. That is why I said that no matter how much ahead you are, even though I was 899, as you see, I had to be extremely careful to avoid any nasty surprise at the end. Moksha takes a pawn on f5. And I decide to check. I wish that the rook should be exchanged. But Moksha places her king on g6. Now you see what could happen if I'm not careful. How many legal moves would Moksha have from now on? One move with the pawn go to g4. The rook could move, but the king has nowhere to go. What does this mean? Stalemate threat. Because all she had to do is if she could push the pawn to g4 and sacrifice her rook, it would be a stalemate. And even if I wouldn't take the rook, she could even force, if the rook went, for example, on to e7, she could even force a threefold repetition and still get a draw. I saw it, that's why my rook goes to f2 to give the king an escape square on h5. We finished 50 moves. I'm ahead by 807. But I better really need to be careful because the alignment of the two kings, hers at the 6th rank and me at the 8th, is not good, or facing opposite each other. She still has a rook for checkmate. In addition, she has perhaps a possibility of a stalemate. Rook goes to e7. And there is mate in 12, says a computer. But look at what might happen. If, let's say, it was curtain to play again, rook to g7, king to h8, rook to h7, king to g8, and before you know it, threefold repetition. In order to stop it, my rook goes to f6, and king goes to h5. Now on, this threefold repetition is not possible. If she checks from g7, I take the rook, and there is no stalemate now, but there could be if she moves the pawn to g4. I go to f1, and if she moves her pawn to g4, it's mate. King goes to g6 again. Rook goes to f6. I also need to be very careful not to repeat the same position. I don't think it is a second repetition. I had checked with the rook from f6, but I think the other rook was in a different spot. I better need to be careful because before I know it, she could claim a draw by threefold repetition if this happens. King goes to h5. Rook goes to h1, check. King goes to g4. And we finished 55 moves. Not yet. My rook now goes to d6. Why to d6? I'm not sure if it's a good move. I wanted my rook to go to b6 to support the pawn to get promoted. Excellence is a computer. I didn't think so. After I played, I didn't think it was the best. Although I'm still winning, but maybe not so fast. Rook goes to a4. And my rook goes to c6. Now what I want to do is I want to protect the knight so I can continue pushing my pawn. Rook goes to a2 for white. And now my pawn starts marching down, goes to b4. Rook to f2, pawn go to b3. Rook to f6. And this was a very, very nasty trap that he set on me. If I took the rook from c6 to f6, it's stalemate, believe it or not. Fortunately, I was aware and didn't just grab it. I'll never forget a game in the tournament a few years ago when I had a completely winning position and I promoted my pawn to be even more winning. And I take a queen and was just ready to put on the board, and then I realized that if I promoted the pawn to a queen or even a rook, it would be stalemate. And just before I placed the queen on the board, I took the queen and throw it as far as I could, as far away as I could, and grabbed the bishop and promoted to a bishop. I would have won even without promoting, but and then I was checking the rules if what I did was okay. And the rule says that if you place a pawn on the last square, you must promote. You cannot take it back. But until you put the new piece on the board, you can change your mind. So the fact that I touched the queen, so long as I didn't set it on the board, I could change my mind. And then I put the bishop and won the game. Here, I caught it even earlier. I knew taking the rook is a stalemate, game ends in a draw. And that is why instead of doing anything else, pawn goes to b2. And even if I lost my rook, queen for rook would be winning, but I have something even better than that. She takes my rook as expected, and then fork. Knight checks king and rook. King goes to 5. Take it. King goes to g4. I promote a queen. After double checking that there is no stalemate, in fact, he has only one square to go, and the king goes to f3. Otherwise, the f5 square is attacked, so king goes to f3. Queen goes to d3, check. King goes to g2. Now, no matter where it goes, it's going to be a mate. If it went to g4, then the queen could go to e4, you see. And she could postpone it by sending the king to f2 by one move, but instead she plays a king to g2 and checkmate. 64 moves, that's what it took me to win the first round and start with a win. But let's review the game. Let's see what chess.com has to say about the game overall. A lot of inaccuracies, I remember, and 79.1% accuracy for Moksha and 87.9 for me. She played as if her rating was 1800, I would say, quite impressive, about 500 points above her real rating. Mine was 2350. Same thing, flattering, of course. I don't need this flattery, but so long as chess.com wants to flatter me, why object? Let's see now the categories. None of us had a brilliant move. We both had a couple of great moves. Best moves, 34 for me, 16 for Moksha. Excellent, 21 for Moksha and 15 for me. Good moves, 5 for Moksha. Book moves, 4 for Moksha, 3 for me. Inaccuracies, 6 for Moksha, 7 for me. Mistakes, 4 for Moksha, 2 for me. And I had a miss and none of us blundered. This concludes the coverage of the first round. But before I complete this video, I would really like to congratulate Moksha. She played a quite good game. It was all decided in a couple of mistakes. One mistake when she gave me an exchange, and the second mistake when trying to correct the previous one, she ended up giving me a piece. She fought very hard until the end, and she almost got a stalemate a few moves before the end. I had to be on alert all the time. It's wonderful to see young chess players rising, and that is my coverage of round number 1. Once again, thanks to all the viewers and to the subscribers, to the likes, and to people that leave some nice comments. I am Harry Lauzaniziris. This is grecochess, my YouTube channel. Ladies and gentlemen, goodbye.